Well, this pandemic and the lockdowns that have followed were always going to take an incredible toll on the travel and tourism sector. Ros Atkins has more details on this. Hi, Ros.
Hi, Babita. Yes, as we've been watching this pandemic play out, of course, it's impacting on lots of different industries, travel being one of them. And today, Virgin Atlantic confirmed what we thought would be coming in some form. It's going to cut 3,000 jobs in the UK. It also says it won't restart its operations from Gatwick Airport. Bear in mind, they've been suspended since this pandemic began. First of all, let's hear the reaction of Erin Hazelhurst from BBC Business.
They're going to have to cut nearly 30%. Nearly 30% of their workforce, 3,150 jobs to go out of a workforce of some 10,000. This off the back of British Airways announcing not that long ago it may have to cut up to 12,000 jobs. And all of this in an environment where 80% flying has been reduced by 80% all around the world. There are some 17,000 passenger jets parked, mothballed all around at airports all over the world. So look, this is an industry that has absolutely been clobbered by this virus. And as I said, you can certainly expect to see more job cuts from more airlines to come.
So there's Erin. Next, let's hear from the BBC's transport correspondent, Tom Burridge.
Virgin Atlantic is fighting to survive. It's applied for a bailout from the British government of hundreds of millions of pounds potentially. That process is ongoing. But as one senior executive at the airline put it to me tonight, they said normally they're quite good at forecasting, but at the moment they simply don't have a reliable crystal ball. Things are that uncertain, but they do believe, they predict that passenger numbers won't return to pre-pandemic levels until 2023. But that scene behind me on the tarmac at Gatwick says it all. An empty runway. We've seen 2 flights take off in the last hour or so. There could be repatriation flights, a bit unclear. But really, think about the cost of maintaining those aircraft. Parking them up is pricey too, and at the moment, very few of them are making any money.
Now, some airlines are warning that travellers may have to pay a lot more for tickets whenever flights properly resume. They say if social distancing measures are in place, fewer seats can be used, and so there will be fewer passengers to share the cost. Though not everyone buys into that analysis. What we can be more sure of is that IATA, the global body that represents airlines, has today said it does support passengers wearing face masks, but it doesn't support leaving the middle seat free. It says this will not improve passenger safety, and this is a very current issue at the moment. Many of you will have seen pictures from a flight between Belfast and London on the Irish airline Aer Lingus. They've been very widely shared. As you're about to see, it was just about full. And in fact, Aer Lingus has since announced it will put on 5 more flights a week. Here's the story from our Ireland correspondent, Emma Vardy.
It was these pictures taken by a worker travelling from Belfast to London, which have added to mounting concerns over the way airlines are operating during the lockdown.
No social distance whatsoever, none whatsoever. Boarding the plane, the queues were down the steps and out onto the tarmac as they were before all this happened. No change whatsoever.
Since restrictions were imposed, the number of daily flights has fallen by around 80%. Some 60 flights a day now arrive at London Heathrow, compared to 600 a day before the pandemic. But there's no policy capping passenger numbers. Aer Lingus has said there was unexpectedly high demand on the day those pictures were taken, and that it's now urgently reviewing its procedures on board. But others in the industry have warned that on a plane, social distancing is basically impossible.
We don't believe social distancing on aircraft actually works, and there are 2 reasons for that, one of which is the obvious economic one. The second of which is around the air conditioning systems on aeroplanes, which rely in part on recycling air within the cabin. That simply defeats the purpose of social distancing.
The BBC's also heard from one member of British Airways cabin crew who told us BA are also still operating some short-haul flights at capacity. And as these images from Paris to Madrid today show, other airlines are similarly flying with full cabins. The International Air Transport Association's recommended safety measures such as masks, but says limiting passenger numbers would push up fares.
Neutralising seats on an aircraft could have an enormous negative impact and could lead to an increase up to 55% in fares.
Reviving the aviation industry will be important to the country's economic recovery, but the government said it must be done responsibly.
These are some of the big, real challenges that we've got to grapple with, but the safety of people has got to come first.
There's predictions passenger numbers may not return to previous levels for several years, and currently no standard approach for how to operate on board. Emma Vardy, BBC News, Belfast.
Now, here's an interesting idea. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern joined Australia's cabinet meeting via video link earlier. She made it clear that New Zealand will not have open borders with the rest of the world for a long time to come, in her words. But the idea they discussed was what's being called a trans-Tasman bubble. The idea here is that people would be able to go between Australia and New Zealand freely and without quarantine. Here is the Prime Minister outlining the plan.
The whole purpose of us discussing the possibility of having a bubble of sorts between us, a safe zone of travel, would be so that you wouldn't have to have a quarantine attached. I think everyone would acknowledge that it would be prohibitive. People just wouldn't travel if they had to stay on either side in quarantine for a 2-week period and have to do the same again when you return.
So there are lots of different elements to how travel's being impacted all around the world, and really what we're seeing here is evidence of a much broader trend, that the disruption from this virus is not just comprehensive, it's also long-term, and that's going to have profound consequences for how we live, and also, Babito, for the businesses and the industries that we all use.